We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Movie versus Film, the podcast, which is dedicated to film history and movie reviews. My name is Robert Bellissimo, and today we have very special guest, Thom Ernst, who is a film critic, commentator, podcaster, and was the former host of the very famous TVO's Saturday Night at the Movies. Thom, thanks again so much for doing this today.
You know what? I'm thrilled to be here. I have watched a few of your episodes, so I was kind of into what you do and your style and what you're trying to do. And so when I got the call, it was kind of like getting a call from the late Regis Philbin to be on a morning show, to be on a morning talk show. Yeah, I was pleased.
Thank you. No, that's high praise because I love Regis. I miss Regis now. I know he was off that show for a while, but I used to watch it a lot. So I want to just go right back to your early life and how did the love of cinema begin for you?
You know, the very first time I can remember seeing a film, I was very, very, very young. And the very first movie I saw full length in a theater was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. My mom took me and I was just like, wow, what is this? This is amazing. When we would go to the drive-ins, which was popular back when I was a kid, I noticed as we were leaving the drive-in that there was a little door on the side of the screen. You know, I guess that's where the technicians went in or whatever. And I assumed that's where the actors went in to do their little performances. And so that amazed me. I was fascinated by it all. Of course, I didn't take into consideration how they got the cars and the planes and the tanks and everything else. In that little booth. But that was kids, right? We rationalized irrational things. So I was fascinated by that. The first movie, though, I remember seeing and catching a glimpse of. I was in my living room as a little guy. I probably was 4.5. And the man in that house was watching a German film in German called M. I didn't know that at the time, but I remember being fascinated by this movie because a child went missing. And that to me was just like, whoa, what is this? And then the images that you got from Fritz Lang's camera work, those low angles, that kind of German, what's the word I'm looking for?
Expressionism?
During expressionism, but those high, sharp angles that he used. And my God, Peter Lorre's face.
Yeah.
Well, I was captivated, and I was asking these questions about this movie. And I remember hearing the title at some point, M, and it stuck with me. So it was many, many years later until I could actually see the film completely in its full length. But even without understanding German, the language, not being able to read the subtitles, I was captivated by this. And that's a strange movie for a young child to be captivated by, because there's not animation or funny antics or anything like that to keep you. I was captivated by the sort of harrowing perspective that we were given. The balloon floating away, the scenes of the police rushing the bars and the clubs of the underground. You know, and the explanation I got from this man that here was a case of somebody who was abducting and hurting children, and it caused the underground, bad guys, as far as I was concerned, and the police, good guys, which we know the terms are interchangeable,
right?
Working together. So that was my first experience with cinema as something that can move me to another world, something that could sort of frighten and cause questions. And I think that was my introduction.
And because I know you grew up in Northern Ontario, and
I didn't grow up there. I was born there.
I'm sorry, you were born there.
I grew up in sort of a Kitchener-Waterloo area, and then we moved outside of Kitchener-Waterloo for the greater part of my life, our childhood, in a farm community out in Petersburg, Ontario. But I was born up in Wabamek, which is just outside of Parry Sound.
Right, Wabome. And did you, when you struck out on your own, was it Toronto you came to when you were,
Damn right.
when you're in your late teens? And what was your game plan then? Did you think I'm going to be a film critic, or I'm going? Did you have something in mind for a career in film at that point, or what were you thinking at that time?
To be honest with you, I had no plan, which is the worst plan of all. And I came to Toronto thinking I had a job at Sports World or something like that, some sports clothing thing that when I arrived, they went, no, we didn't hire you. So I was left in Toronto without a career, without a job, just out of university. I loved movies. I thought there was absolutely no entry point for me as a career that way. If I had been encouraged, I would have been a director or an actor. Those who can't do criticize, right? So that's that's where I would have been had I think if I had been properly nurtured the way into the career I wanted to be. Right. As it was, I ended up doing odd jobs until I somehow a woman took an interest in me, and she was running a radio station. She took enough interest in me that she invited me to host a weekly show. And so I jumped at that. And I also worked as a publicist, unqualified, and I eventually got fired from that gig, deservedly so. But what that did as a publicist introduced me to a lot of people in the industry, right? And then this radio show too. Mm-hmm. So that I didn't have a plan, but that was where I ended up. Yeah.
So, and what did you study in university?
English and film. Yeah, I did study.
So it was film. Okay.
Yeah, I studied English and film, but I didn't really think that there was a career for me in it. I didn't think that. I thought this happened to people who lived in Hollywood.
Right.
And the people like Cronenberg, etc. They were lucky, and I didn't understand their luck or how they of course, luck is what you make for yourself. But I didn't understand that. And it was, so everything happened to me rather late in life, which I'm grateful for. I mean, I guess I'm just grateful that it happened at all. And I still think it's somewhat of a miracle, but.
That's interesting. So you come out of university, you go to Toronto, and you start to do these odd jobs. So what other things was it a lot of different jobs? You mentioned the publicist, and did you dabble in a lot of different things?
I think I think in my mind I believed I could be a writer, and I'm still chasing that dragon. I believed that that was going to be my future, and that somehow I was going to have a breakthrough in writing. I always wrote since I was very, very little.
Right.
And interesting enough, or at least I think it's interesting, as a kid, and I'm talking grade 7 and 8 and 9, I wrote film reviews about every single movie I saw in notebooks. Every single film I saw, I wrote a film review about. So I guess that was somewhere, that seed was planted somewhere. Yeah. Sometimes life takes over, and there's energies, and I'm not talking ethereal energies or anything like that, although there might be, that take over. If you drop the ball, sometimes there's the world will pick up the ball for you and carry it. Yeah.
And when did TVO start? Because I know you began as a researcher there, right? Is that
good for you.
Yeah.
You could have been a researcher there, finding that. I don't think I've put that information out there, so good for you. Yeah, I got hired. Oh, I did a film, a short film with a friend of mine named Dan Hawks, who is a editor. Excuse me, an editor out there editing film, and I think he does writing too now, and documentaries. So we did a short film together. We were neighbors, and we did a short film together called Rose's Time. Don't look it up; it's not worth it.
That's what I was going to ask. Where can I find your Sundance?
Yeah. No.
Well, if it got into Sundance, it must be somewhat notable. No.
Some people liked it.
Okay.
I am going to just give full confession. It was a nice little film that got more attention than it deserved, mostly because we had Gary Farmer as our executive producer. Now, this is no slight against Dan, who directed and I co-produced, and other people involved in the film. They all did a fantastic job. I wrote the script, and it just wasn't up to par. Sadly, we got into Sundance under the umbrella of the Indigenous program. We had no right being there. Just saying that up front now. Back in 1998, I think it was, and starting out, we just thought we're in Sundance. We're in the Indigenous program. That's weird. But that's probably because of Gary Farmer, who is a well-known Indigenous actor and activist.
Right.
But I would say now, absolutely, we should not have been there. But thankfully we were, because that film got me the opportunity or the attention of TVO, who bought the short to air it as interstitials. So yeah, people liked it some. And I got in. I got my foot in the door as a researcher. Actually, I didn't get the job. I came in second, and the guy who got the job ended up getting a researcher job on the film about I forgot the title of the documentary, but it's about
the celluloid closet.
Yeah, how do you know this stuff?
I stalked you, Tom.
Holy mackerel! Did I write about this? Did I mention this somewhere?
You have, yeah. You've in interviews, you were a researcher, that it was meant for someone else, and that person turned down the job to research the celluloid closet documentary, and it was yours.
And it was mine, and I hung on tooth and nail, man. I wasn't going to let go. Unfortunately, that it ended up slipping from me, but not after a fantastic run. Yeah.
So you start as a researcher, and how? Okay, so what did they have you research? Like what programs to put on Saturday night at the movies? Was that what it entailed?
What I did was, my job was they would say, okay, like, they were in charge. We got Michael Leo, we had Risa Schumann, we Murray Battle, Rudy Boot, all these people, and they're in charge, right? And I'm this guy that steps in, and my job was to take a look at, and the first two movies was The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. First two movies I worked on. Oh, yeah, and I honestly didn't care for either of those movies. I was. I make it sound like what I said earlier about not having a plan. I always loved the movies. I always was involved in everybody, even before I got any kind of a job resembling someone who knows about the movies. People came to me. So I built that out of nothing, out of just enthusiasm.
Yeah, passion and knowledge.
Passion, I think, was the big thing there. And so I wasn't crazy about Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kids, and I wasn't crazy about The Sting. But what happened was, my job was to research the interviews that attached to these. And so I found the interview with the writer of The Sting, who studied pickpockets, and the directors that we had interviews with. We had an interview with Paul Newman. It was scarce. It was not a big one. Nothing with Steve McQueen, but Oh, sorry, Steve McQueen. Why did I bring him up?
You mean
Redford? Yeah, nothing with
Right.
Redford. I was thinking of Towering Inferno, which I did later.
Then again, McQueen was supposed to do Sundance Kid. I'm sure maybe you found that when you were researching.
Yeah. So
but it ended up being Redford.
And I ended up loving the movies. I ended up loving these two movies because of the information I found out about them.
Right.
And then you watched them differently. And I saw the power of getting sort of background information on these movies and films and directors, and the power of that and what it lent to the film itself and the narrative of the film. And it's suddenly you became aware that the movie was more than just what you saw on the screen. It was the collection of all the things that went into it, all the passions and all the stories, not just stories of the people we saw in The Sting, but the pickpockets who made a living doing this kind of thing. Became fascinating. And I realized what Saturday Night at the Movies was doing. It was taking the culture of cinema, and you know this, but it was taking the culture of cinema and spreading it out into a larger culture that isn't just the consumer, but the people who live their lives, who could sort of recognize themselves on screen, even if that recognition is twisted to form some kind of more popular a cinema storyline, but it's there. And if you dig deeper, you find really interesting stuff.
When you say when you started to learn about what went into the films and that was powerful, do you mean in terms of, perhaps just understanding everything that went into it technically in the casting, or just how people are then going to take to it on an emotional level based on the story and the characters? Or is it a mix of the two?
Well, everything's a ripple effect, right? So you drop the stone in the river, and that first stone sort of introduces you to pickpockets. I'm sort of stuck on that right now, but and then that ripples out to a community of criminals, I guess. But why is that, and what's their life about? And so it becomes storytelling, no matter how simplistic it is on the screen or how simplistic it might seem. It does have its roots eventually in things that are quite serious and things that resonate with other people. So I think you said emotional connection. Definitely there's an emotional connection.
Right.
And if I was to go out and start talking about the emotional connection of The Sting or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, most people will probably go, well, they're historically inaccurate. They're two very attractive men. They're selling this story. I mean, what do the films say about women? They could be negligible. There's the hired killer in The Sting, and then there's Catherine Ross riding on the bicycle handle. So arguably there are points in these movies that you could say there's nothing there. It's all vapid nonsense even. But go deeper. There's other things. There's emotional connections and things.
Yes, no, absolutely. And how long did you hold the position of researcher? How long was that for?
Quite a while. I would say about 3 or 4 years, and then I became associate producer. And that only means that something in television. Associate producer means in film. Associate producer basically means what you want to raise. Okay, you're associate producer. It involved doing more. Eventually, I became the interviewer.
Right.
So when Elwie left, I had about 5 years with Eli Yosef. So when Elwie left, I became the interviewer, which was a huge a leap for me. But I had the years of interviewing as on that radio show I mentioned earlier.
Yes, right.
So I had that experience, and my first interview was, oh my God, he just did a terrible movie about his bowling character from
John Turturro.
John Turturro was my first interview, followed very closely by the late director, Boys in the Hood, late director.
Oh,
Another
John Singleton.
Singleton, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here, Robert.
My encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah, they used to say that about me. Mine's an encyclopedic knowledge, but one that you got to flip through the pages a little bit longer.
So you start. So it's interesting because you had mentioned that you were always loved conversations and talking to people, and just from watching you in interviews and talking to you now, you're very natural at it and very outgoing. Were you always like that even when you were young, or was that something that you felt you had to develop because of the interviews?
I think the reason, if people do like my style, and not everybody does, and sometimes not even me, but if they do like my style, it's because. Does that answer your question? I think you were asking if my style was developed or if I always had this enthusiasm. I definitely always had this enthusiasm. I definitely always wanted to talk to them about the movies, which is not something my family, parents, even though they took me to the movies periodically, it wasn't an area that we dealt in. Wanting to be an actor or a writer or director, that's not what we do. But my passion for talking about movies was always there. And I could remember being in a theater, in the Lyric Theater, now closed. Well, so many theaters are in Kitchener-Waterloo, watching a horror movie. And the woman in front of us was taking notes. And I realized she was the local film critic. So my friend and I, and it was a bad enough horror movie that we could talk through it and make jokes and not bother anybody. I don't advise that. I never like the people that decide that they're funnier than the movie. But this was one case that it seemed to be okay. And my friend and I, his name was Doug Collins, tried to say witty things so we can get in the paper into the film review. And the woman was laughing at our comments. And so that was a good thing, but didn't show up in the review. But I did think, what an amazing job to write film reviews.
Yeah.
I never thought, again, I thought one person in the world has it, and it's not me.
Right. But just in terms of, naturally, even I know from doing this, you want to make people feel welcome and talk to them and be able to carry a conversation apart from just the interviewing as a skill. Were you always good at, if you met someone, you could carry a really good conversation, or was that something you had to work on?
Well, I love the assumption that I was always good, which assumes that I am good. And I think I had a natural ability to talk, but I just feel like I got to make it clear that natural ability to talk and talk about cinema was not something I was necessarily proud of. In fact, I was a little embarrassed by it because it wasn't valued, right? There was no value in talking about movies. There was no value in my surroundings. Yeah. So I wasn't proud of it. And I thought, okay, well, I've got to cool this a bit. I got to learn not to be so outgoing. I got to learn to be quiet, to subdue myself and stuff. So my interview skills are really based on a natural curiosity and instinct to find out more about what the other person has to say about their movie or about their lives, whatever. Now, I do. Yeah. I think I ramble. And I don't
not at all.
No, I'm not just here, but in my interviews, and I think that is either a technique people love because it's so natural, and I love to think of myself as the person who wants to be in this room with you or with Peter Falk or whoever,
right,
and ask the questions they want to ask.
No, that definitely comes across, which made me wonder. Did you you answered that perfectly? It's just that you always had such an enthusiasm for the movies that it was such a natural extension to then be able to put it into your work. Did you have, when you were a researcher? Did you have, how much time would you have in between researching each guest or movie? Was it, I mean, it was every week, right? So did you only have a week to
No,
really take a deep dive into the two movies per week?
no, it was much more formatted than that. The season was pretty much set up well in
Okay.
advance before because we did like what 12 episodes a year. Oh, maybe it's funny how you forget these things. And then we would repeat them, right?
Right.
And one of the things too, one of the tricks we had to do is use up the library, because we had certain films for a certain amount of time, so we would rematch them. So some of that research would already be done. Anyway, I had weeks to do this research, and then the rest of the gig was about pulling together all the paperwork that needed to be done, so that went to air.
Right.
And occasionally too, I would be in the edit suite with the editor. If the director couldn't do it for some reason, and helping edit together a show,
The episode.
the interviews, yeah.
Right. And before, because I know you've also, you've written for CBC and the National Post. Was that before your days of TVO, or was that during and after? Oh, okay. So it was after.
Almost all of that was after. CBC was definitely after. I did get a gig on a show once called Play, as a film reviewer, as a dual film reviewer with someone else, hosted by a man whose name nobody mentions anymore.
Right.
And that lasted about a year or two, and then I thought my CBC days were over. But after TVO, I got hired on as a replacement critic, which happened quite frequently. And I also befriended the show, morning show by Mary Ito. So
was that on TV? Was that on TVO?
That was on CBC. That was on CBC.
Okay.
So I got to do a lot of sort of magazine style of programs for them, or interviews for them.
Okay.
So that developed a new sort of set of skills. Is it too damning to say that I listened to the styles of Richard Krause, who you've had on the show, and then of course Jeff Pavere, one of the kings of Canadian criticism, and currently Rad and Eli Glasner. I find all those are all men. There's also like Karen Gordon, who's fantastic, and I listen to these people, and perhaps it's that little voice in your head that goes, "Damn, those guys are good. They're on the ball. They're quick. They're concise." Those are skills I don't have, So maybe I'm a good alternative to that. But quite frequently, I listen and I think, yeah, they know. Excuse me again. They know what they're doing, and they've got it down pat. So I'm surprised my career is lasting as long as it has. This is not to damn what I do. It's just to say what I offer is different, and it surprises me that it's still people are still interested. I'm grateful for it. But
I think it's because you bring a real everyday quality, like someone that you can meet anywhere. Whereas perhaps when you're up against perhaps like you had mentioned, the Pavere or Krause, you get almost intimidated by the fact because of their style is very, very professional, very, very good. Not that yours isn't, but there's a certain quality as if we're just in a coffee shop or on the street talking that that I really like. That it has it's their conversation as well, but with you even more so. I could just see you kind of anywhere, if that makes sense.
It's true. If I was to write my biography on this, it would be that anyone can be a film critic, but I also don't believe anyone can be.
Right.
And I read so many reviews and watch a lot of video blogs of reviewers that I just go, hey, take some time and watch some real cinema, take some time and build that up. But I think this still comes from that era of not believing that this is possible.
Right.
And so, I'm a bit self-deprecating that way. And I remember, there's Bruce Kirkland, Toronto Sun Film Critic. Yes. And he's a fantastic guy, great writer, and great on air. He was a guest many times on Saturday Night at the Movies. And Bruce Kirkland is someone who I consider a friend. Mm-hmm. Now, he once said to me about my self-deprecating quality and maybe even used the word insecurity. And I kind of was taken by surprise by that. And I know it came from a good place coming from Bruce, but I thought to myself, but those are the things that make me, that I thrive on those. If I didn't have those uncertainties, if I was like completely confident and certain of my opinion, I don't think I would have the effect that I do. And I don't think I would enjoy what I do as much. I like my uncertainties. I perhaps I've seen too many romantic comedies, but it's always the guy who's unsure and uncertain. That's who the guy I relate to in cinema quite often.
Well, it's much more human, it's you're not afraid to show perhaps an uncertainty that perhaps someone else would think is a flaw or an insecurity, but we all are. No one is 100% certain. No. We just act like we are, right?
Yeah, and some people are better at acting than others.
Perhaps,
but, You're absolutely right, and I have done things, of course, that I've gone, oh my Lord, and I've done things on air that I've gone, oh my Lord,
right.
But overall, I just really appreciate. I would hate to iron out all the crinkles and wrinkles in my character because, as I said, because I think that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, which is why I really enjoy listening to your interviews and their podcasts, and they're all accessible, right? So it's great that we have those. Just going to go to the chat box and say hello to your friend who David J. McNeil, and
I love Tom. David.
Yeah, hello to David and Tom. Just recently went on his podcast called Cool Story. Which people can find. I know it's on YouTube and Apple, I believe, or iTunes and many different platforms. And Pepito Live someone in Costa Rica saying, Thom Ernst, what an amazing guest. Thank you. You're welcome.
Wow.
Someone from Costa Rica. Here we go. Yes, thank you. Feel free to leave comments or if anyone has questions. Thom, are you okay with answering anything?
Could you imagine me not being?
I have to ask, right?
Yeah. No. Geez, yeah, no. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be thrilled to make one up.
Perfect. I know that you've mentioned in some recent interviews that you've been working on a book. And is that book out, or is he still working on it, or?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I because it isn't out. I have a very fine agent by the name of Rob Firing with Transatlantic Agency, and so they're working hard on my behalf. And it's a book. It's what I call the creative nonfiction. So it's it's a true story, but with a lot of creativity thrown in, because it involves dialogue that I couldn't have been party to because of either I wasn't born yet, or because the people that were there gave me an outline of the story, and of course the details and dialogue had to be made up. So that book is called The Wild Boy of Wabamek, and it details a rather dark period of my life and how I was able to work my way to, the Robert Bellissimo show.
Perfect.
People must love saying your name.
I often people will. It's a common last name, so a lot of the time people will. Well, do you know this Bellissimo such and such?
Oh, yeah.
And I always grew up saying Bellissimo, which is the anglicized, and my parents still say that, and I now always say Bellissimo because that's. And my mother will sometimes ask, "Why are you saying?" Because they were sort of grew up encouraged to fit in, to the culture here. So they would always say Bellissimo, and now I refuse. I say Bellissimo.
It's a beautiful name, and
yes.
I can imagine when when you met your wife or partner, that she probably repeated that name over and over and over again in her head.
Yeah, still working. Yeah, she's. We still have to officially marry so that she can have the last name.
If she wants it, she may not want it. Her name may be equally beautiful.
Right. Oh yeah. No, it is. I'm curious about the. I want to jump to some of the because I had asked Thom to pick a few movies that he loves or that perhaps people don't know well enough, and one of them you picked, which is probably my favorite film, A Woman Under the Influence, directed and written by John Cassavetes. So why is that a film you recommend?
When I saw that film, it seemed to me the kind of film that would be inaccessible because of its style, its sort of documentary narrative. It didn't follow any real pattern of Hollywood cinema that I was used to. It was more like European cinema.
Yeah.
And so I was fascinated by that. And what truly, truly fascinated me by it was that I was gripped by the story, despite not having all the bells and whistles to pull me in. Now, the lure, the hook is, of course, Gina Rowland's role as Mabel, I think her name is in the film.
Yes, yeah.
Perfect name for that character, who is, when under the influence, you think perhaps maybe she's being dominated by her partner, which could be the furthest thing from truth in this. She's actually loved dearly by her partner, played brilliantly by Peter Falk.
Oh, I agree.
Oh my God, everything about this movie resonates. But the scene, okay, so I'm going to try to stay focused for you.
No, it's okay.
No, but the influence is not alcohol, drugs. It's not a domineering partner. The influence is her own mental illness, and it's so wonderfully portrayed because she has these breakdowns that is so. I almost used the word tolerated. That is so recognized by Peter Falk's character that even when he invites all his work buddies, and I don't know if they're buddies or actually they're his crew, over for impromptu dinner, throwing Mabel into like, hey, all the guys are here for lunch or dinner, and Mabel
spaghetti in the morning.
And she has a breakdown, rightfully so. But it's such an interesting breakdown, and it's such an endearing moment. And what's really endearing about it is how Peter Falk's character recognizes it and goes with it. But it isn't about this wonderful man putting up with his wife's mental illness. It's about the mental illness and how she functions within this and how she deals with it and how she is not... She doesn't persecute herself. It was so engaging, her performance.
Yeah,
I just watched it again because I'm prepping for this interview.
Right.
And I think I could, just talking about it makes me want to rush and see this movie. I showed it to a past girlfriend who was sort of wandering through life after her education and not knowing what she wanted to do. I think she was focused on being a poet. But I showed her this movie, and she was completely, equally engaged by it. And that and several other films that I showed her. And she is now a filmmaker. I have no idea if this, she's a successful filmmaker too. And I have no idea if these films influenced that, but in my little world, it did.
It's interesting that because this film is so ambiguous that to me, you say it's her mental illness, and a lot of people have felt that, and then other people have felt that well, it's not so much that she has an illness, but she breaks because her husband can't accept her for who she is and is somewhat controlling. And then other people see it as a depiction of alcoholism. And to me, I don't know. I don't know if it's just all those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that makes talking about film worth it, right? Because not that you necessarily contradicted anything I said, but there were opposing views in what you just said, and right. I don't think they're necessarily untrue or incorrect. I think that there was some alcoholism. I didn't see Fonda as controlling, but that could possibly be a 63-year-old man's point of view of the film, and perhaps through the filters of what we know about relationships now, and we know how insidious a control can be, and dominance can be in a relationship, that we might be a little more sensitive, or perhaps I might be a little more sensitive towards that. But my takeaway is this wonderful relationship. He didn't make excuses for her during that dinner scene, and I think that resonated with me. He didn't come across as embarrassed, at least not from my take on it. So that resonated with me. But you know what? I think all perspectives are absolutely welcomed in this case. And you're right. Nothing is spelt out for you. Cassavetes never did that.
There's so many things that really make you wonder, because he takes, a lot of people, I'm sure they find this frustrating with movies, perhaps the quote unquote more art movies, which is very much what our channel is based on, what the difference in stories and how stories are told. And because he often takes that motivation away, or the psychology behind the why of what they're doing, some people hate it because they need answers. And what are you saying with this? And there's so many possibilities here, because even that scene where she comes home with that guy drunk and sleeps with him, and then the next day thinks that he's her husband, and you think, is that from alcohol, or is that because she's mentally ill? Is she having a breakdown because she is mentally ill, or because her husband can't accept her? I mean, there's really no one answer. There's just possibilities, which I find so I think that's perhaps even just, yes, I agree. Talking about it, I want to go back and see it, even though I've seen it a million times.
Yeah.
But there's always so much to discover.
That whole sort of pacing and ideology behind we'll say European cinema, but artful cinema that refuses to give you answers, and that does frustrate some people.
Yes,
but I remember in the early stages of exploring that cinema, because I was a Hollywood guy. I loved the Burt Reynolds movies, Clint Eastwood movies, before he became a staunch Republican. So these movies confused me and confounded me. But then again, I had that M story, to sort of go, well, wait a minute, there was that.
Anyway, something was pulling me in.
So I remember watching the Bicycle Thief, which I had seen in university at a film course, and I saw again working with Saturday Night at the Movies, because we had a foreign film section, and going to my big boss, Rudy Boutigno at the time, a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and very, huge figure in the cinema community here in Canada, and talking to him about A Bicycle Thief, because he was Italian, or he probably still is Italian, and asking him about the ending of The Bicycle Thief, which was so frustrating for me because it didn't end.
Right.
Right. And and it didn't end, and that was so annoying to me. And I talked to him. I said, why would he do this? And Buñuel said, when a film doesn't end, it's not locked in the morals of the time. If that movie had a conclusion, it would forever be locked in the morals and the ideology of the decade it was made in. Without ending, it lives on forever.
That's a good point.
And I just thought that's brilliant. Rudy?
Yeah, no, I love
yeah.
that. Yeah, and I always love films that don't end, and I know people hate that, but I suppose here in whether you're Canadian or American, we're so exposed, as you said early on, to pure American films that to then grasp either a John Cassavetes or a De Sica is very, very, very challenging. And what was university your big time to see a lot of foreign films?
Yeah, that's when I started, and I had a friend. I'm always mentioning my friend's name, Bruce Burgess, and Bruce, though he was in a Rush and all those other music bands and stuff, he also loved chamber music, classical music, and foreign films. So as we were like to do of the era, maybe I should just speak for myself, not for Bruce. We would get primed to go see a foreign film, as we did in that days, and sit there in these and Bruce would explain what was going on and explain the subtleties to me. So that introduced me to foreign films. Then seeing him university further did that. And not just European films, but American films with a European sense. So we saw Tess, Roman Polanski, and Rosemary's Baby, which, of course, a lot of people say Rosemary's Baby is just an American film, out and out and out, but it's not. It's got a very European sensibility about it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, yeah, that sort of opened the doors for me.
I see. And did you ever meet Jenna Rollins over the years, or anyone involved in A Woman Under the Influence?
I tried so hard.
Peter Falk, no?
No, I worked so hard at that.
That's too bad.
God, Gina Rollins, when she was in Toronto doing, I think they had a retrospect at the Bell Lightbox.
Yeah, about 10 years back, I believe. Yeah.
And I worked myself to the bone to land something there. I don't know why. It's when I heard. That's when I found out about the almost toxic relationship she and Cassavetes had, which I thought was sort of an idealized relationship in moviedom, and it certainly was. But they fought. And they broke up and they fought. So maybe she just was tired of that conversation.
I'd imagine so, and even. I don't know if are you I'm sure you're familiar, but are you someone who likes Ray Carney, who wrote all those Cassavetes books, the film scholar?
Yeah, I know of him, but did he sort of shed some light on this?
Well, I think she's I think Cassavetes fans have a hard time accepting that she's private to an extent, and people want to know everything about John, and he perhaps wanted to share more in his books than she would allow, and there was a lot of trouble and conflict, and people blame her for that. But I always say, do you want everyone to know everything about you? If she wants people to just know about the movies, then that's fine. But I agree. I think she is a little kind of, she's done, this box set, I'm sure, I'm not sure if you have this, but the Cassavetes one is very much because of her, and he hated biographers as well, right? He wanted people to see the movies, and that's it. So yeah, I'm not surprised if she's perhaps, sick of people getting a little too personal.
Yeah, that's a great box set, by the way.
This is fantastic. And for anyone, if you haven't seen A Woman Under the Influence, it is on the Criterion channel right now. The great streaming service that I love. I don't know. Do you have that, Tom?
No, but you know what? They used to be the library would have the Criterion service. Is that still part of that, or?
Well, they about 5 years ago they made a deal with Criterion, and they were streaming a lot of them. And then something happened where that ended, and then a lot of them are on Canopy, which is also through the library. So I don't know if any of Cassavetes' films are on Canopy, but then 2 years ago, Criterion Collection started the Criterion Channel, which is a fantastic streaming service. What I love, I don't even watch anything else.
Yeah,
and,
I go. Well, I also
this is on there, but the physical media, of course, is what I prefer because of they have the featurettes on the channel as well. But
by the way, Saturday Night Movies makes the claim that we invented the extras on DVDs.
Oh, is
we would
right?
say that because we were the first to kind of do that, and then it became very fashionable on DVDs. Probably not legally, we can't make that claim, but that's
there it is. We're putting it out there.
Yeah, and on that box set, there's Opening Night, which is also a tremendous.
I love that. Yeah, we just recently reviewed that as well. But yeah, they have Shadows, Faces, and a documentary called The Constant Forge, Killing of a Chinese Bookie. Yeah, this is
underrated.
A film.
Killing of a Chinese Bookie, underrated, man.
I agree. I love that movie.
Do you know how hard it was? You do. I know you do. How hard it was for Cassavetes to get that movie off the ground? Women Under the Influence?
Oh, yeah. So I think that was the first film to get self-distributed as well, because he did it on his own.
He did, and then Scorsese stepped in.
Yes.
And helped him out. And then, he did. And Peter Falk, who I guess they worked together on Columbo. Cassavetes was a villain on Columbo. I love the Columbo series, man.
Yeah, his episode is great as well.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the Johnny Cash episode?
I don't think so. No,
that's worth checking out. Okay.
No, I haven't.
Back to movies.
Yeah, I know. There was. He had a real hard time getting it made and distributed.
No festival wanted it.
Yeah, no one wanted it, and then of course it went on to, I think, was the highest grossing film that he made. It started to really resonate. But yeah, he had a hell of a time.
Like that, eh? Like, so you could be going around, like, let's say you wrote a book called The Wild Boy of Wabamek and every publisher has turned it down. It could still be the possibility of a very well received book. So that was
you never know.
You never know. Well, I'm just saying that in the course of great art. I'm not saying Wild Boy of Wabamek is great art, but Women Under the Influence is, and so many films that had a hard time finding their feet proved to be essential cinema.
Oh, absolutely, and I love those stories. David has a question for you. He'd be curious to know. What actor or director most surprised Tom or challenged Tom? I suppose he means when you interviewed them.
Oh my God! Well, the most challenging person, this is no surprise to anyone, would be Gary Busey, who challenged every single question I asked of him. And we had him on for the Buddy Holly story and A Straight Time. I believe he had a part in.
Gary, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, who's Gary Busey? But now I know who you mean, Buddy Holly. And he was in Straight Time.
Yeah. And his son Jake was in that. But he was problematic since the moment he walked in. Just didn't like me and kept making references to the crew as if they were party to his dissatisfaction. So that was difficult. And there was a few. Most people were really, really wonderful sitting down and chatting with people like Fred Ward. Do you know Fred Ward?
I know that name.
Yeah, he was in, Tremors was a big film for him. And he directed a movie about Anais Nin, which was his sort of, did he direct it or star in it with her? Probably starred in it. I can't see him directing. He was a single word answer guy.
I know his face. I just Googled him quickly. I recognize him for sure.
Could you no, since you have him up, can you check the name of the Anise Nin movie he was in? Maybe that's a little hard to do.
That he directed, you
I
mentioned?
don't know if he directed it or if he just starred in it, but it was certainly a personal project for him.
And he was Tremors. Yeah, he was in Shortcuts.
Oh, I love Shortcuts. He was
yeah.
Shortcuts. Robert Altman. That's one of my favorite Robert Altman movies.
Oh yeah,
Nashville.
I love that one.
Nashville is awesome.
Yes, I actually just saw that last year for the first time.
How'd you see it? That one. Did you see it on a big screen or did you see it on your?
It's on Canopy, just on my TV.
Well, that is a movie to get immersed in. That is a movie to get immersed in with sound and visuals because it's a tapestry. That's what every critic calls that movie. But it's an absolute emerging tapestry of Nashville, of these characters. And oh my God, I just love that movie.
Oh yeah, me too. I want to revisit it. And even Altman is someone I don't know as well as I probably know the likes of Cassavetes or Elaine May or directors like that. But he's someone I really want to repeat some that I've seen and see more of.
Okay. So I do these talks when COVID is over. I do these talks a lot of times at clubs, at like private clubs around Toronto, and they have a huge screen and we have a great evening. I'm inviting you to our next Altman one as my guest because you and your wife. And I'm going, because someone who loves cinema, who feels that they don't know enough Altman, needs to rectify that. They need that needs to be addressed.
I agree. He's someone that I really need to know more about. So when someone like that is so, giving you a hard time, like you mentioned, the Buddy Holly actor. Well, what do you do in that case? Did you just try to keep, did you ask him, why are you giving me a hard time, or how do you handle
that? Well, that one I didn't ask why he was giving me a hard time. I don't think I ever asked. I think I probably, I think that would have been the right thing to do. But I think what my tactic is to sort of just forge on ahead, acknowledge if what I think he said has substance. Like there was one point where Gary Busey said, "You're asking me, do I remember?" And I did. I would say, "Do you remember that scene?" Which is a stupid way to pose a question. And he called me on it. Now I'm not saying everything Busey said to me was enlighten me, but that one did, and especially talking to someone who publicly has suffered some brain damage because of a motorcycle accident. So not only was my question and my phrasing of that question poor in its phrasing, but it was also insensitive. And so in that way, I felt like I could learn something from Busey. But other than that, I just sort of stormed on ahead until Busey would pull off his mic, which he did several times during the interview, pull off his mic and say, "This interview is over." And then I would go, "Okay, thank you for chatting with us." And then he would say, "And another thing," and he would go on and go, "Damn, I thought this interview was over." But and with Fred Ward, he wasn't giving me a hard time. He just didn't know how to extend his questions. And I would work really hard to phrase them in a way that wouldn't allow him to just go, "Oh, I don't know. I don't remember."
Right. Just the one word that reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Robert Mitchum in interviews, but he did that to everybody.
Not Elwie. Robert, yeah. If you could check out the Elwie Yost interview, I think Elwie was so he threw everyone off their guard because he was so not Hollywood. He was so someone. He was a high school teacher, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a high school teacher, and he used to come in class dressed up as characters from whatever. Was it English he taught or history? I don't know, but he would dress up as the characters and try to engage the kids that way. And so that translated very well. But he threw everyone off their game. So even Mitchum, who was gruff, he was a gruff interview, but he responded to Elwie. He had that ability.
I'll have to see if I can find that.
Yeah, it's going to be very hard to find now. I don't know what TVO has done with those.
Yeah. They should really put them out. I'd love
Darn
to
right.
see. Yeah, no, I'd love to see that. Did you get along with Elwee quite well? What was your relationship like?
I introduced him to vodka. I
Oh,
introduced him to Bombay Sapphire. Him and his wife. That is my great claim to fame. So Elwie and I got along. We didn't see a lot of each other because he lived in BC when he was still filming the show, and I was there. So he only flew in for 2 weeks while we taped all the shows. A lot of work for a guy his age, but he was always up to it. He got mad at me twice. Once when I told him that I really didn't like Lost Horizon.
oh.
And
At least it was at least it wasn't over something more to do with their job or something. It's over a movie. That's okay.
Yeah. But he didn't like it if you disagreed with him on a film. And especially something like Lost Horizon, which was for him the golden chalice of cinema. It defined everything for him. The way Preston Sturges and Robert Altman, defined things for me. So and the other one was I didn't like Lonesome Dove, the televised version.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Yeah, with Duval, right?
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. And that was another big faux pas. And he got mad. He wasn't just like he was miffed. If you didn't like a film that he really it just annoyed him.
Oh God, I get like that sometimes.
Yeah, so do I. And I try not to.
Yeah, me too.
One thing I have learned is that it is overall just a movie, and I have gotten into arguments, and I have gotten tense with people, and people have gotten tense with me. And I have just decided that I'm not going to go there. If someone has an opinion of a film, I'm not going to try to change that opinion. If they ask me for my perspective, I will give it to them the best I can, but I'm not going to give it to them as a hard, cold fact.
Right.
It's just too stressful.
No, I know, because I get like that as well. Is there a movie that that you love that if people don't like, that drives you the craziest?
Nashville's one of them.
Okay.
I just don't, and I was thinking about this yesterday. I just don't get how people cannot find their way into that film. I don't get missing out on everything that film talks about, from the misogyny in the country and Western world to the emotional breakdowns to the insensitivity of is it Shelley Duvall's character? Is Shelley, who plays the woman with the in the platform heels, and who
are you talking Karen Black?
No,
or the singer, the woman who's the singer, you mean? Maybe
no. She's visiting Nashville on the precipice of her aunt is dying. And she wears high platform shoes. I think it's Shelley Duvall.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I think you're right.
Her insensitivity and her uncle's response to that is just heartbreaking. And so Nashville's one of them. Another movie is, although I'm lightening up on this a bit, is The Godfather. Particularly The Godfather too. But I do understand that its portrayal of Italians is not the most flattering, and perhaps even borders on what we would consider racist now. But that's not what I see when I see The Godfather. But I'm not Italian, so I wouldn't. What I see in The Godfather is the dynamics of power, and in what I see in Godfather Part 2 is Fredo's character.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love this scene with him and Pacino where he really lets loose on Michael, and just a great actor who died far too young.
Far too young. Oh, Dog Day Afternoon. Talk about John. Dog Day Afternoon is a flawless piece of work as far as I'm concerned.
I love that movie. I know recently, I think with David, you perhaps talked about that, or maybe it was another.
I don't remember, but it's. I think maybe, hopefully, with David. Because Yeah, Dog Day Afternoon is a flawless movie. There's lots of movies, but there's more movies that I love that I understand people hate. You know, like
Right.
Bugsy Malone.
Right.
You
Oh,
know, and At Long Last Love. I
right.
get that people hate those movies, and I understand why you hate them.
Right.
Another movie that I know, and I showed my wife and daughter recently, and that they didn't get, and is Cabaret, which I think is another flawless movie. I think
Yeah.
Bob Fosse
I
was a
love
director
Fosse.
who, yeah, he left
Yeah.
way too young, and
Oh
all the
yeah.
stuff, even the stuff he did where he choreographed,
Right.
My Sister Eileen and things like that. He's brilliant.
Oh, I love his movies. Lenny is a real something that really was a real early inspiration for me, and all that jazz and just great. I don't know. Did you see the series a couple of years ago where Sam Rockwell played him?
Fosse and
Vernon with
no,
Michelle
where
Williams.
was it on? It wasn't on Netflix. So
I believe it's an HBO show. I
right.
forget how I saw it, but it's really good. Yeah, if you
Okay,
want to see it,
good. Yeah.
I really recommend that one.
And we got to talk to Fosse and Vernon. So
Oh, you did?
I didn't. Elwie did.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Elway.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, wow. That would have been something else.
Mm-hmm.
Which critics have you admired over the years? Even when you were young, were there certain critics that you always liked to go to, or were you not more aware of that until you perhaps got older?
I maybe didn't know their names, but I read them all the time. I know them in retrospect, and I knew that Pauline Kael was
Yeah.
a really fun read. I'm really amazed at the writing that's happening now in the major cities. I think that we have great writers in Toronto, and I'm not just saying that because they're my colleagues. And but Jeff Pavere has long been a man I respect, and he might be younger than me, or maybe just a year or two older. I have no idea.
Yeah, he's no, he's old. He's older than you because he was born in '57. He mentioned so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was born in '58, so.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't know why I was thinking you were born in '63. So never mind.
I
am
63.
Right, that's what I got wrong.
Yeah,
tomorrow,
I'm
right?
60, tomorrow I'm 63.
Yeah.
And yeah. So what was I saying? So Pavere, when I was a young man working at at the Harborfront for the film series with James Kwan. Another failed attempt at a career that didn't pan out anywhere. But I was doing publicity for him, and I remember being in awe of these critics that came to do these films. And one of them was this young kid, and Pavere is a young man. He was hip, good looking. He just he had this way about him, but he was kind. He was so friggin' kind, and he was writing for the Globe and Mail, I think, at the time.
Yeah,
or the Star. I don't remember.
Yeah, he's done so many. Yeah, he's done quite a few.
And he was just this kind dude who reached. And I'll never forget that first time I saw him. I just went, "Who is this cool kid who's being nice to me?" Right. Anyways, so Pauline Kael, I thought her writing, I would buy her books, and I thought her film writing was superb. I thought I disagreed with her vehemently sometimes, but now in retrospect,
yeah. So do I.
Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes.
And I read Malton, but he was more populist, and I disagreed with him even more. He hated Taxi Driver. How dare you? And I found guys like John Simon a little too arrogant for me. And then I went back and read some early Graham Greene reviews, because he used to be a critic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh. And so all those guys have had a tremendous influence on me. The guy from Britain, and I'm blanking on his name now. I think his name is Andrew
Saris.
Well, Andrew Saris for sure, but Andrew Saris sort of falls in the category of John Simon. Right. A little too heady for my liking, a little too academic.
Yeah, I agree.
I prefer, quite frequently, there weren't a lot of other voices other than white males
Right.
growing up. And I think that was problematic. And it's probably still problematic. But
Yeah.
the Pauline Kael was at least a glimmer of a different voice. And
That's true.
Yeah. And I certainly miss Elvis Mitchell's voice. I thought he had a very unique take on things, and I
did he pat when you say miss? Did he?
Oh no, he didn't pass, but I just don't see him anymore. He left.
Okay.
Like, who leaves the New York Times? Was it the New York Times or the New Yorker?
You know, I know him a little bit. I'm not too familiar, but I didn't. So he was the Times critic and quit.
Somewhere, yeah, some up. It was an upper echelon critic, and he walked away from that.
Oh.
What the? Anyway, but he was an important voice, or is an important voice. I met him once, and we went out for drinks and more drinks, and then more drinks. And he was just fascinating. First of all, I thought it was cool that his name was Elvis, and you know, he also too was a cool looking dude. There's Karen Gordon's writing and voice on CBC. I really appreciate. I do like when Kimberly Hughes used to write for Now magazine. I'm thinking of a few other, and I think Rad, who writes for Now magazine, is a very important voice out there. Cameron Bailey, of course, was so fun to read, and of course he knew cinema. So
no, absolutely. What another film you picked that you mentioned a few minutes ago, Bugsy Malone, which I only just saw for the first time, and really I had those songs in my head after.
You're not quite saying you liked it though.
Well, you know what? I did like it. I wasn't. It was more after the fact, or it was more like I couldn't. I was kind of like, oh, they're just kids. I can't get into this. But then at a certain point, I forgot that they were kids, and then it was really that last scene that really
you give a little love.
Yeah,
in it.
I love that. And I just thought this is a great story about friendship. And it just what a genre bender to have kids as adults, and they acted so well as adults, all those kids. But
especially
I want to see it again. Yeah, I want to see it again. Yeah, John Cassisi, I believe his name.
Cassisi, yeah,
he was great.
He was fantastic. And my dog. Okay, so here's one of my proud moments of a dad is I determined we are going to have movie night once a week, and unfortunately I have to share the choosing of the films. So there's 3 of us in the family. Every third week we get a great movie.
Right.
That only I appreciate.
Right.
And so one of the great moments I have is I'm trying to sell my daughter on a film, and I said, "What about this one?" And nah, and she doesn't like musicals, and I love musicals. What about this one? Nah, and I said, "Oh, you're gonna love West Side Story." Nah, you're gonna love Cabaret. She didn't. You know. And then I said, "What about Bugsy Malone?" And I showed. She says, "Let's see a clip." And she sees a clip, and she goes, "Nah." And then all of a sudden, they get into the music part. So you want to be a boxer, which is one of my favorite moments.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that song.
Yeah. And she goes, "Wait a minute. Yeah, okay, I'll try it out." And she loved it. So that was my great moment. But I interviewed Paul Williams, and between Phantom of the Paradise and Bugsy Malone, we sang just about every song there was. That sounded like a line from a Joni Mitchell tune or a Chris Christopherson tune. Man, that movie is so full of moments, and the song about the boy want to be a dancer.
I remember the scene. The kid who worked sweeping up the club,
mopping the floor.
Yeah,
and there was sort of that movie came out in 1976.
Yes,
and so it was breaking down a lot of racial stereotypes and and challenging some racial propaganda
cast,
hugely. And And Jodie Foster was amazing. Alan Parker, you probably know this too. I will not give you any information without prefacing it with, you probably already know this because you are a cinephile. But Alan Parker said that he could have left that set and Jodie Foster would have taken over, but she was that skilled at that time. But I thought her Tallulah was great.
Yeah.
There could be some question about the sexualizing of children.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I could see back then, perhaps.
But it wasn't about sexual,
No.
It was about them playing these vampy characters, and bad guys. Well, that song could have gone on 3 minutes longer for my liking. It was too short. I love that song and that dance number. Bugsy Malone.
The dance numbers and the songs were all so great. Did you see that when it came out? Was that a film that you saw very young?
Yeah, so 76. How old would I have been? I've been in my teens, I guess. Yeah, and I saw it again and again and again. I used to go to movies, if I liked them, I would sometimes stay in the theater until the second showing came on.
Oh,
yeah, and I would do that quite frequently. Yeah, and that was one of them. Yeah. So I chose it because it's a movie that I think not everybody knows about. I certainly recognize it's a hugely flawed film, and I just don't care. And even Alan Parker didn't like it at first. And now
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he refused to talk about it. And any biography or article that was written about him before a certain date, it doesn't get mentioned.
Right.
But now yeah, but now he's a champion of the film. Not as big of a champion as I am, but a champion. Right. Well, of course, now he isn't. He's no longer with us, but he's since became a champion of the film.
And then you have Scott Baio, young Scott Baio as well. He was another person that I thought, oh God, this guy. But he's quite good in it as well. You can't help but like him in it.
He's charming in the film.
He is,
but he grew up to be a Trump supporter. So what can you
do? Not much, I suppose.
You can't do anything. Yeah. I mean, well, and who knows? Half the people listening to this might be, but I don't think so. If you really love movies.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you pick Bugsy Malone, and another one that you picked, the Canadian one, Kid Detective. They can almost work as a double feature.
They could,
to me.
Well, the Kid Detective I wouldn't put with Bugsy Malone, although I could see why you would. The Kid Detective I would put with and that's always a great question. I thought of making a Saturday Night of the Movies board game where you had to pair up movies and stuff like that. It's my idea. I said it. If anyone wants to pick on it, my idea. Trademarked it. What would there was a movie I would put with. It's a Bobcat Goldthwait movie with Robin Williams called World's Best Dad or something like that.
Oh yeah, sounds familiar.
That's the one I would pair.
Seen it.
Yeah. The reason I would pair that is because the titles suggest something different than the movies. Than what the movie delivers. Both movies have a real caustic edge to it, where and there is in both movies there's a scene where the tone changes drastically, and as one critic wrote that who liked the film but not as much as I did, he acknowledged, says if you're able to make that switch, that of tones, the movie works, but if you're not, it doesn't. And I think I liked it. I liked the fact that the first half or first third, I guess, of the movie of the Kid Detective is Leave It to Beaver, right?
Very much so.
Yeah, and the second half is this The Long Goodbye.
I didn't see that. That's what I thought. That's exactly what I thought. Speaking of Altman.
Yeah.
Altman noir, neo-noir detective film, and I didn't see that coming. No. It took a real dark turn. And I wonder if Long Goodbye was even an influence, like even the fact that he was
I think.
It must have been, because he was like, even though he's a young detective, he is like someone who fell asleep in the early 2000s and like didn't wake up till now because someone, I think his secretary says, well, I know you're not on social media.
Yeah.
You
She's
know,
great.
yeah,
Sutherland.
she was really, really good. But that was another film. I was having a similar experience as I was like, oh, I can't get into this. I don't really care about whether he finds this or not, even though I recognize that it was about him being who he is and being an individual and sticking to his guns and what he wanted out of life. And then it was another one that suddenly it was when that second half came around that suddenly I just got so hooked. And I won't spoil it, but I loved the way it ended as well.
That final scene will
Brilliant.
be studied and talked about, I think, for a long time. And I do think the Long Goodbye is a definite, certainly Chandler is a huge influence on that. You can't.
Must have been.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. You can't. No. But, you know, and I'm surprised because I was hooked immediately. I was hooked the moment the guy comes out of that he drives up in the back alley and the guy comes out and he says your dad's gay, and you know, and I went,
right, yeah,
I'm in. Yeah. What's this about? You know?
Yeah, there's definitely moments for me where I was like, wow, that's really, and then I like I said, I think I'll like it more the next time.
Yeah,
like with Bugsy Malone, because now you get more of the emotional connection and the why behind everything, and I feel like I'll be able to get more involved next time around. But because it's so, for me with plots, if something is so plot, I prefer the characters. But this was strong on character as well. But that, yeah, like I said, that second half, and the ending, I just thought was perfect. You know, I just thought it was a great
ending. Yeah, that ending is one of the great endings in cinema, and it's recent. It's a young director. It's Canadian.
Yeah.
And you know, he's worth mentioning. Evan Morgan.
Yes, he went to. He's a York grad, I believe.
Yeah. We worked with Matt Johnson, The Dirties, and Matt Johnson's another director who's just great. You know, it's funny. You watch The Dirties and Matt Johnson, and you hear them in some interviews, etc. That and you think these guys are, you know, they're kind of the nouveau coming up, and they're not really. They've been established in Canada cinema now for some time. But you think that if you're going to do a live interview with them, you get nervous. I do, because I think they're going to be playful to the point of distracting, to the point of being almost humiliating, you know. But they're not. They love cinema. They love talking about cinema. And they're just great. They're not just guys who are making a movie to see how far they can get with it or just for the glamour. They're guys like yourself who are into movies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No,
and the musical, the Bugsy Malone. I wanted to mention this about Bugsy Malone and my daughter watching the movie. We still go to each other now after seeing Bugsy Malone and say, what about my flower, boss? Where's my flower? Which to me is one of the great moments in that film.
Yeah. No, I definitely need to revisit it again one day. That's on Canopy for anyone who hasn't seen it.
Yeah, and don't hate me if you don't like it. It's not a great film. Musicals work for me generally because I get lifted out. They're just such an escapism for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you think now that's, you know, I had this long discussion with Jeff Pavir about the history of Canadian cinema, and as I'm sure you know, the one thing that kept coming up was the fact that distribution. We didn't own the theaters here, and this was a major problem over and over again. Do you think now with streaming basically taking over, Canadian films can have more, the English-speaking Canadian film can have more of a recognizable identity on screen and not hide the CN Tower and all this kind of stuff? Do you see that happening possibly?
Well, remember earlier I said if I didn't know the answer to your question, I'd make one up? Here we go.
Go ahead.
So I do think that since we've been streaming lately, and a lot of the big Hollywood movies haven't had an opportunity to get the release that they want, and not everybody wants to see the latest Marvel or DC. Well, nobody ever wants to see the DC ones apparently, but the latest Marvel on a small screen. So not just Canadian films, but other smaller films have had the opportunity to be watched, and I know that from my experience. So I don't know on the greater whole, because I live in this enclosed arena where everybody loves cinema and will, and at 13,000 feet, everyone has seen it in my circle, right? And that is the closest related film we have in Canada to Women Under the Influence. Right. So I do think that opportunity is coming around, and as cinema becomes more recognized as international, we can have a plot-driven movie in Toronto. Silent Partner is an amazing example of that.
Yeah.
And that's back in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I think, I do think people are becoming a little less sort of Hollywood-centric. But I'm saying that judged on the kind of movies my daughter's been watching, the kind of movies that I've been having to review, and I sit down and I go to watch them on the screen. My daughter, who's 14, sits down beside me, and it's a very slow-paced, artful movie that I think is dragging, and she gets right into it, So that makes me think that she's developing more patience for the kind of cinema that is defined frequently as Canadian, or European, certainly something that is not comparably American.
Right.
Her big criticism of a lot of American films that I've taken her to see is it's too noisy. There's too many explosions. And I'm going, that's good. I'm glad you see that, because that's why I didn't like Aquaman, So
yeah.
It
does answer the question quite well, and I agree. I mean, if the theaters are, not that I want theaters to go away, but if that's been our biggest obstacle, because America owns them, and I know it's more complex than that. There's definitely, I mean, look at TV. I mean, they don't necessarily, Kim's Convenience or Private Eyes or Murdoch, they don't hide that they're Canadian, and they're shows that Canadians watch. So maybe we'll start watching Canadian movies.
Sure. And you talk about the CN Tower. Well, just because we're Canadian doesn't mean the film has to be in Toronto. You're welcome, exactly. Alberta. So there are many stories to tell, and Schitt's Creek has certainly, how many doors has that opened for us?
Yeah.
I think The Kid Detective is the kind of movie that American audiences could watch. Well, it's filmed in a warm climate and a recognizable site that they can relate to. But it's the kind of storyline and the kind of movie that I think engages people that would otherwise be engaged by a big American budget film. Another movie that I threw at you late in the game that is just the opposite of Kid Detective as far as style and pacing is Black Cop. Yeah. But one of the most significant movies about racial injustice that I love, because the first time I saw Black Cop, I honestly didn't get it. You talked about that you're going to go back to Bugsy Malone, you're going back to Kid Detective. Well, quite frequently for me, the first viewing is downloading. I just download it. It goes into the brain, and it's the second viewing that I really get something out of it. Black Cop is, have you seen it yet? I don't know if you have.
I didn't know. I haven't seen it yet, but I do plan to, because I know Ronnie Rowe, the actor. I've met him before.
Well, it's a troubling film, and when I did the Q&A for it at a film festival, the first question was talked about it being a comedy, and I went, "What?" I didn't say that because I did one of my I knew it was a comedy routine, right. And I wouldn't have said it was a comedy, but it was certainly a satire, and it was brutal in what it was depicting. And after watching Black Cop, if you could be at all question the impression that the Black community has and relationship with police, and if you can at all sort of question their Black Lives Matter movement as anything but legitimate, then you didn't see the movie properly, because Black Cop is that powerful. So what's my point? My point is that Canadian cinema, whether or not it gets an opportunity to be seen, is doing important things. So opportunity aside,
Right.
its effect and importance is as astounding as any European cinema is doing.
Yeah, no, well said. I agree, and I think there's definitely hope in the future. I'm curious because you've done some other podcasts over the last few years, making movies the Canadian way.
That was a TV show.
Sorry, the television show, Making Movies the Canadian Way. What happened with that? Because did you decide to just end it, or?
I got tired of being on TV and getting a paycheck and loving, doing what I love. No, they canceled the show. Nobody was watching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That is fine. That's what happens.
Right.
So that got canceled. And I looked back at some episodes and thought, well, I didn't think it was on long enough for us to find our feet, And again, I think that was something that we needed just another year or two to really find our feet. But you do some things because you absolutely love it, and you do some things for your ego. And if you're doing some things to fulfill your ego, I guess that's okay as a driving point, but it's not going to keep you in that seat, right? It's not going to engage. People aren't engaged by people's egos. They're engaged by people's personalities and people's passion. So I think still in that show, Making Movies the Canadian Way, my passion was there, my interest was there, my hopes were there, but the ego was still recognizing that it's on camera and this is an opportunity that I can't blow. And I'm not saying I blew that. It just didn't work the way we wanted it to. But people are saying, people have said, you're in your 60s, the opportunities are becoming less and less, and they are. But less and less is not none, right?
Right.
And you don't need a whole lot of opportunities. You just need one or two. I had many good shots. Saturday Night in the Movies was a brilliant shot. I used to sit at my desk, and there I can say my ego wasn't taking over, because there I sat at my desk and went, there is one job in Ontario and basically Canada that is this one. And I have it. Holy mackerel. So do your job, do your research, be nice to people. Don't let your ego get in the way. And that's exactly why that show worked. And that's why it worked for Elway too. He wasn't an egomaniac. He wasn't. He was just a dude who loved movies.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that show all about? I mean, it's right in the title, Making Movies the Canadian Way. So was was every guest to talk purely about
Canadian cinema?
Where was that on? Was that on Rogers or where?
No, it was on Bell 5, so it was a local show. Didn't get a lot of eyes, but we had some great people and some great conversations. Robert Lantos, Valerie Buhagiar, Ingrid Veninger, other people, Art Hindle,
Art Hindle, yeah. I really enjoyed the one with Piers
Hanlon.
I don't know why I was going to say Piers Morgan.
Everybody does. It always comes out.
Yeah, when I say Piers, I say Morgan. I really enjoyed that one as well. And then there was the other podcast you had with co-host
Louis Marone.
Yes, that was for a few years as well.
Yeah, that was fun. We'd have had you on. You'd have been on.
Oh,
you'd have been a great guest. What would have been your two movies? It's called This Movie's About You. And we asked
This Movie's About You.
Yeah.
That's right.
We asked people to choose their double feature, sort of like jumping on my Saturday night at the movies fame. What would have been your two movies? Or is it two?
So they had to connect.
That somehow there had to be a theme too.
Man, it's my mind always goes to Cassavetes.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely a woman under the influence. God, what would I pair that with? You know, maybe an unmarried woman. That's another. Well, it's similar.
Similar.
In
You know what, I would definitely not pair Women Under the Influence with Anne at 13,000 Feet. I don't know if you've seen that Canadian
Oh,
feature.
I've heard about. I know the director because I had a bit part in his last feature.
Oh,
How
which was
heavy
what?
this hammer? How
Oh,
heavy this
you're in
hammer?
that. You're in How
Yeah,
Heavy This Hammer. I gotta
very
watch it
very
again.
briefly. If you blink, you'll miss it.
Yeah, but were you shot like this? Because all the shots were like that.
I
It's
no, I
extreme
don't
close
believe
up.
so.
Oh,
I can't remember. You know what? It was so brief. This was years ago. I was supposed. They almost had me as a waiter, and then it was a glorified extra. Let me put it that way. But it was in the floor cinema. But I met him, and I've heard great things about that one.
I love that
And
movie.
yeah,
By the
yeah,
way, when
have
I was
to.
talking about doing shows and egos and things like that, you're perfect for this kind of thing because you know, whatever ego you have that made you start this. I mean, what's coming through is your genuine interest in cinema, and that's what you want to talk about. And
Mhm.
so you have never, unless I pointedly ask you, you have never brought yourself into the conversation, which just extenuates how good you are at this, by the way.
Oh,
And
thank
that's
you.
not that's I should probably have said that off air because it sounds insincere when you say it on, but
No,
it's
not
not.
at
It
all.
Yeah.
No, I yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that, you know, that was something Rick Krause said last week, which I thought was great. That he said that he never starts a question with "I," and I thought that's a really good pointer. You know,
Yeah.
just to make it all about the other person. Um, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And you know, you've done these, and that was in front of an audience. Uh, this movie's about you, and so
Yeah.
is making movies the Canadian way. Uh, was that a conscious choice on your
Yeah.
point? Is there something about the audience interaction that you know? It's almost like you're an actor in that sense. Like you love live theater. Like, uh, what does the audience do for you that you prefer they be there?
I really feed off of interaction with someone. Um, and I used to think that Zoom and other platforms like that wouldn't work for me, but they are because I'm still feeding off of that. But the
Right,
energy of a live audience interacting, if you can hear them laugh, if you can hear them interact, it just feels great. I love playing to them. At the same time, and then this is again is to the subject of ego. The producer and director wanted me to. The guest was already sitting in the chair, and I would come in at like I was Letterman or something. I was wholly aware that no one knew who I was unless they watched Saturday Night at the Movies. So it was a
right,
little bit embarrassing coming out as if I was the main attraction.
right,
So even though I liked it and I liked that idea because it did feed to my ego, I talk about ego a lot because it's the thing that can get in your way and the thing that has
yeah,
gotten in my way. Um, I like it because it fed to it, but I still don't know how to do it to make it feel organic. But the live audience sort of feeds that part of the ego, but yet at the same time, it gives me something to play on. It gives me an energy. What you forget, though, is that that audience quite frequently thinks that because they're in a live studio, they have to be quiet and attentive. So they don't
right,
give you anything unless you're
right.
talking to them. All right, I turned that way because I didn't bring a live audience into this, but unless you're talking straight to them,
Right.
that's why we made that decision. It certainly worked with This Movie's About You because a lot of that was about
Yeah.
playful interaction.
Right. And you would do that like I was because I know Tony Napo who was on your show, and as soon as you introduced him, I heard people shouting out, and it was perhaps because that was also at a restaurant, right? Would you
Yeah,
often do those at restaurants? Is
it was
that
that one
was
restaurant that not only gave us their space for free, but gave both Lewis and I a meal. Ooh, that made me
oh
hungry. And it was a Mexican restaurant, so that was cool. and gave Lewis and I a meal, and also gave us the equipment to do it, so we didn't have to rent it, because they had all the sound equipment there too. Oh, I guess that restaurant should be named now. And it's a Mexican restaurant in the Junction. I hope they're doing well. I can't remember their name. Yeah, I mentioned it every podcast though.
Yeah, I know you mentioned it was Dundas West and Bloor. I'll find it and put it in the description box.
Oh, good. You're a kind man. Thank you.
Yes.
I hope she's doing well.
I live right at Keele and Bloor, so I know that area, of course, but
you would know it then, because it's on Keele and Bloor. It's on Keele and Dundas West, right on the corner.
Oh,
it's a Mexican restaurant, and it's a young woman who's like really cool. She's a singer. She sang our theme song.
Yeah, I'll have to. I'm seeing a restaurant and the title's not there, but I'll get it and I'll put that in the description box for sure. Question from Peter Hughesman: what is coming up for Thom in the next year or two?
Oh, Peter, it's good to hear from you. Peter is an old friend from my Harborfront days. And we spent a lot of time going to film, Peter and I.
Oh, great.
So, Peter, great to hear from you. Hopefully my book is going to find a publisher. I'm working on a new one. It's kind of a horror fiction, completely fiction. But I have a lot of faith in the Wild Boy of Wabanmek, sorry, and talks based on David's McLean's interview with me. I got a call from a filmmaker who wants to do a documentary style of drama based on that conversation. So we're in early talks about that. I continue to write film reviews for Original Sin .ca. So,
there we go. And I just had a couple of more questions. Again, I appreciate your time of today. Of course, is the TVO, like, they canceled Saturday Night at the Movies in 2013. I mean, after all that time, what happened there? Were the ratings just going down, or how did that decision come about?
I think it's a political decision, and I feel like now that we're almost 10 years after the fact, that I can be a little more honest about how I felt about that. So prior to this, I always spoke gratefully and fondly, and I still feel those things, grateful and fondness for the program and the people I worked with and the people I worked for. But I do think there was a political edge going on. The funding for TVO seemed to be sliding. There was not the support of the political party at the time. There never is. The perception is, of course, TVO is television, and that means that has no value for us anymore. The value of that seemed to even be decreasing because of online entertainment. Netflix was starting to show its face, and a little copycat named TMC was blowing their horn loud and clear and getting all the credit for a show that we basically started. So that is my gripe. And I think that our ratings had gone down significantly. Several reasons. We decided, and I think it's the right decision, to not stick to classic films that were either outdated or didn't represent Toronto or Ontario in the way that it deserved to be represented. It wasn't diverse. It didn't include LGBTQ considerations, racial considerations. Classic films are fantastic. How many times do you need to see African Queen? And it's out there. So we started to be a little more experimental with films like Mysterious Skin and foreign cinema and more Canadian cinema. And that threw the hardcore Saturday Night at the Movies fans off, yeah. So the numbers dropped, but you know what? We got to be frank. They dropped across the board. They dropped for every single station network across the board. And so we were maintaining pretty good numbers, anywhere between as low as 30,000 to as high as 100,000. And you know what? I maybe in TV numbers, those aren't great. Schitt's Creek certainly got that more and more. But for a movie show that I think really was contributing and working harder at contributing to the narrative that was the new community of Ontario, and not turning a blind eye to be what was becoming the vast majority of voices out there that were under not represented or underrepresented. And that's what we were doing. And we were starting to go online. So the wheels were in motion, and they would have taken off. We were going online, and then they just pulled the plug on us. And I got to tell you, when they pulled the plug, we had interviews set up with the late John Carpenter. That is heartbreaking to know that we had to cancel that interview, and now forevermore it's gone. So
yeah.
If I sound a bit bitter about it, I am, because I think the show offered something, and I think we were on the right route. And Shireen Ali. Shireen Ali, who was my producer at the time, was really working hard at getting everything online, making the proper deals to get them online. And she was a fireball, and she would have made that work. And together that show would have worked. So
that's disappointed. Because I can remember early on. I don't know. This was in the afternoon on Saturdays. They would have these, whatever they were showing at night, there would be interviews, not necessarily with Yoss, but like old interviews and like little half-hour programs with the actors or the directors that would then be for the movies that night. And I love that. That was something that really got me interested in what went into these movies. Because speaking of Altman, California Split, I remember, then they were interviewing George Segal, who just passed away, and
I did that interview.
Oh, that was you. There you go. And I remember being 18 and being like, this. It was really exciting and educational. So it's a shame to hear that they just pulled the plug on it.
Yeah, and again, I think for political reasons, to sort of draw an uproar from the crowd, but that uproar came and left, as all things do. But while we were on air, TVO treated us fairly. They treated us kindly, and they recognized what we were contributing to, and they were supportive. So I have no complaint that way. I do think their decision was rash and maybe ill thought out, but at the same time, let's take a look at the bigger picture. It's everything comes to an end. Weird that it should come to an end after 39 years and not hold out for the 40th year, right?
Right. Right.
But then maybe there would have been an uproar if we reach sort of such a grandiose spot and then disappear. 39 years is a great run for anything, and I was foolish enough to believe that things don't get canceled like Saturday Night the Movies. I wasn't foolish enough to believe that I couldn't be replaced. That I knew, but I didn't think the show could get canceled.
Yeah, it's a shame, because I remember learning a lot, and which brings me to, I just had one last question for you, which was, do you think people are, maybe perhaps young filmmakers, or are people losing interest in film history? Do you see a lot of people not being interested in films? Even I remember Spielberg saying even in the 90s, he was finding people weren't interested in anything before 1970. And now I'm seeing people perhaps not even know Dog Day Afternoon or Network, just from young people you've met, have you noticed that? I was just curious what if that's something that pops out at you as a problem.
Can I give you a really short answer to that?
Sure.
as long as there's people like you, Robert, doing shows like this, we don't have a problem.
That's true. Because someone will carry it forward, I suppose, right?
Yeah, you're proof. You're the prime example that there's still an interest in this.
Right.
You know, you can talk circles around me about cinema, mostly because I'm older and I'm easier to fool. But no, you're doing a fantastic job. Look at your wall behind you. You know.
Yes. My classic cinema actors wall. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My wife hates it. She's telling me I got to take them down.
No, believe me, all my movie posters are in this one room, this office. So
yeah.
I know, Robert. I think my experience with getting to know cinema also was introduced really, and all the ways I've told you prior to this, but in also watching Eli Yost. And I remember during one of those many odd jobs that I told you about, I worked from 11 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. in the morning, and I would start watching only on weekends. And I would start watching Saturday Night at the Movies, and I would see these interviews, and I would go, the movies I already saw, so I didn't care about seeing the movies again. But the interviews fascinated me, and and I just couldn't believe that this man who was so uncomplicated was actually gaining access to these people. And I remember as I left for work is that I said to my girlfriend at the time, all I want someday is a job where I could stay home Saturday night and watch this show.
There we go.
Perfect.
And it happened.
Just happened. Yeah. It happened. I ended on the show. That was more than I could have hoped for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Thom, thank you so much for your generous time and being so open with all your great stories about your life and career and some films that you really, really love. And I was like some of the ones you mentioned I hadn't seen, so it was great for me to take the opportunity to go.
Even though you really like them.
Yeah, so that's okay. Well, perhaps not in whole, but I definitely admired moments for sure. Another one you mentioned was The King, which I saw when that came out, and I have to see it again. I didn't get a chance the last week, but really liked that one. I remember.
Oh my God! Now talk about one that changed tones. Yeah. And Paul Dano is an absolute miracle in that movie, and he should have been nominated for Best Supporting. Not enough people saw that film. I showed that on Saturday Night at the Movies. That's one of my most prouder finds. That Mysterious Skin. Neither got the attention it deserved.
Yeah, that I haven't seen that either. I have to see that one. But yeah, The King, I remember I saw when it came out and kind of came and went. But I'll have to revisit that one. And just if people are interested, Thom, now you have this podcast through Kingston, Rewind Fast Forward. And where can people find that?
That's on iTunes and all the other platforms, and there's several podcasts called Rewind Fast Forward, but this one is from the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, and my name's attached to it. So and it's fun. Like we've talked to great directors. We hope to talk to the Black Cop director in the future, but I'm really having a good time doing that podcast, and it's produced for me, so my work is easy. I just show up and chat.
Very nice, and I'll put some of the links to that in the description box. As we mentioned, a cool story was recently with David J. McNeil's podcast that Thom was on, and you're developing a website as well called Outside Voice.
Outside Voices, for child abuse survivors, as a place for them to go to understand that they are not alone, and that the ability to speak up is difficult, essential, but you'll do it in your own time. You'll find your outside voice.
Do you know when that site will be ready, or is that still?
I really hope to have it ready before the end of next week. But it's I want to make sure it's done right, and so maybe I can email you and you could post an update for me. You've been very good about reposting my stuff, so.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, please do. And I'll share that for the audiences here. And for anyone, if this is your first time on our channel, please consider giving us a subscription, a sub, I should say, by clicking the subscription button right beside the description box below, and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time we go live or release one of our regular videos. And for anyone watching the replay, you'll see the Movie versus Film logo floating above my head right now. To your top left. And sorry, you know what? There's a question right before David Robertson. I know he was a first AD in Toronto for many years. My mother, well into her 80s, loved Alwee Jost. Did I know him? She wanted to know. What a name, she explained. Reminds me of your father. She loved the show with Alwee. Oh, sorry, I thought it was a question. That's a great.
Elwee Yost, yeah, it's Elwee Yost, and people
sorry,
who
I said Jost.
everybody does, but people of a certain age certainly love Elwee Yost.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much again for everyone who left comments and questions. And Tom, thank you again. I really appreciate your time. This was a real treat. And thanks so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, everyone.